Meghan walked into a room believing she could fix everything. She carried a word she had used for months: reconciliation. She walked out carrying a different word: denied, not postponed, not delayed, not under review, denied. And the distance between those two words is the whole point of what happened next. For nearly 2 years, the public heard a specific promise. Meghan Markle wanted to heal. She wanted to rebuild what had broken between the Sussexes and the rest of the royal family. She spoke about it in interviews. She referenced it through carefully placed sources. The message was always the same. This was a woman who genuinely wanted her family back together, a mother who wanted her children to know their cousins, a wife who believed distance had been the real enemy all along. That was the promise, and promises are not graded on intention. They are graded on what happens next. The expectation was not complicated: genuine family healing, rebuilding trust, a credible path back for the Sussex family into the broader Windsor circle. Not full reinstatement, not a return to working royal life, just the quiet, human thing. Birthdays acknowledged, holidays shared, children who knew each other's names not from newspaper headlines but from actual time spent in the same room. That was the bar, and for a while it seemed reachable. The sources kept saying the right things, the tone kept sounding warm, the interviews kept painting a picture of a woman ready to do the work, and the public, tired of watching this family tear itself apart, wanted to believe it. The narrative was carefully managed. Sussex allies told friendly journalists that Meghan had been asking about George's school and Charlotte's hobbies. Every detail was selected to signal openness. Every leak was designed to make reconciliation feel not just possible but imminent. And the palace, cautiously, began to test whether the words matched the reality. Then came the charity reception. It was supposed to be neutral ground, a children's literacy event with enough cameras to keep everyone polite and enough distance to keep everyone safe. Anything tied to children carries extra weight inside this family. It connects public image and family unity and the next generation all in one room. Catherine was there with the children, William was there in his capacity as patron, and Meghan was there because an invitation had been extended as a goodwill gesture. The kind of gesture that gets described in briefings as a confidence-building measure, the kind that only works if everyone treats it like what it is, a test. Meghan failed the test. Not dramatically, not with a scene that would make the front pages the next morning. She failed it quietly, in a corridor with words that traveled faster than she expected. She pulled an aide aside. Her voice was low at first, then climbing with every word. She wanted to know why Catherine had been positioned front and center with the children. She wanted to know if it was deliberate. She wanted to know if William's office was keeping her away from the children on purpose. That single question changed everything. It did not sound like a hurt sister-in-law expressing frustration. It sounded like someone probing children's schedules. It sounded like someone who had thought carefully about access and positioning and who was standing next to whom. And in any institution that protects children, that distinction matters more than tone. It matters more than intent. It matters more than whatever explanation comes afterward. The moment children enter a conversation like that, nobody in the room gets to file it away as harmless family drama. Everyone standing nearby understood the stakes had just shifted from uncomfortable to serious. The aide did what aides are trained to do. He wrote a formal summary, not a casual email, not a text message to a colleague, a formal summary, the kind that gets filed, the kind that gets flagged, the kind that is built specifically to document serious concerns. That summary reached William's office within hours. It reached Catherine shortly after. Catherine read it and went still. That is the detail that those close to her keep returning to. She did not raise her voice. She did not demand action. She went still. And in that stillness, something shifted permanently. This stopped being about recognition. This stopped being about who stood where at a charity event. This became about whether children were being pulled into a fight they never asked to join. Catherine had spent years absorbing public attacks. She had endured interviews designed to undermine her. She had watched her private life turned into content for streaming platforms. She had borne all of it with a discipline that even her critics respected. But the children were different. The children had always been the line she would not allow anyone to cross. And what Catherine understood in that moment, sitting in silence with a printed summary in her hands, was something William would only fully grasp later. This was not going to stop. The question at the reception was not an outburst, it was a pattern. And patterns only end when someone decides to end them. William read the summary that evening. He read it twice. Then he set it down and did not speak for several minutes. Those who were present say his face carried the same expression they had seen only once before. The day he learned the full details of what had been said about Catherine during the early years of the marriage. Controlled, completely controlled. But underneath it, something final. The gap between the promise and the reality was already wide. Then it became a canyon. Weeks later, a letter arrived. It was addressed to Princess Charlotte. It referenced an unannounced family event, not a public engagement, not something that had been reported, a private gathering that only a tight inner circle knew about. The letter was warm, it was personal, it mentioned Charlotte by name and referenced details about her interests that suggested real knowledge, real attention, and that was precisely the problem. A member of palace staff caught something buried inside the letter that made their stomach drop. It named an upcoming event that had not been announced to the children themselves, an event only a handful of senior aides knew about. The question was immediate. How did Meghan know? Because if she had access to information that private, someone on the inside was still feeding it to her. Someone inside was still passing along schedules. Someone was sharing details about the children's lives. Someone was making it possible for letters to arrive that referenced things no outsider should have known. Her exile from the family's inner workings was never as complete as the public had been told. The letter to Charlotte was not a threat. It was not inappropriate in its language, but it proved a breach that the palace could not ignore. And in a household that had already been hardened by years of leaks, this one landed differently. This one involved a child. An internal review was launched within days. Staff were questioned. Access logs were examined. The circle of people who knew about the unannounced event was small enough to count on one hand, and the investigation did not take long. The breach was traced. The source was identified. And while the palace has not publicly confirmed what happened to that individual, those familiar with the outcome say the response was swift and permanent, the kind of response that does not come with a second chance. Now here is where fairness demands a pause. There is a version of this story where Meghan is simply a mother who lives thousands of miles from her nieces and nephew, a mother who wants her own children to have a relationship with their cousins, a mother whose directness gets misread as aggression because the institution she married into communicates in silence and subtext. Cultural differences are real. The gap between American frankness and British restraint has destroyed relationships far less complicated than this one. And the charity reception question, stripped of context, is not unreasonable. Why was she kept away from the children? If reconciliation was the goal, proximity was the method. Asking about it was not criminal. It was not even unusual. In most families, it would have been the obvious thing to do. There is also the Netflix factor. Reports surfaced that the Sussex production deal had been quietly reworked. An exit clause tied to falling viewer numbers. A dramatic reconciliation, captured on camera or referenced in a documentary, would have been exactly the kind of narrative boost a fading deal needed. That must be named. But it must also be named as what it is. A rumor, unconfirmed, possibly true, possibly irrelevant. It does not change the facts on the ground. And treating it as proven would be the kind of shortcut this story does not deserve. The defense deserves its hearing, genuine concern, misunderstood intentions. A woman navigating a system designed to make outsiders feel exactly like outsiders. A woman whose every move is scrutinized through lenses she did not choose and cannot control. All of that may be true. All of it may even be sympathetic. But none of it changes what the aide documented. None of it explains the letter. None of it addresses the core concern, the children. And now we reach the moment that will define this story for years. Harry made one last call to William, not through intermediaries, not through carefully worded letters reviewed by legal teams, a direct call, brother to brother. The kind of call that used to happen without thought back when they were two boys walking behind their mother's coffin, back when grief was the thing that kept them close instead of the thing that eventually drove them apart. Harry's voice was steady at first, then it broke. Is there really nothing left between us? After everything we survived? William did not answer immediately. Those who were briefed on the call say there was a long silence. The kind of silence that holds years inside it. Years of shared bedrooms and shared loss and shared anger, and the slow, irreversible pulling apart that neither of them had ever fully chosen, but neither of them had ever fully stopped. Then William spoke. Loving you doesn't erase my responsibility. Being your brother doesn't erase the damage, Harry pressed. He asked William to reconsider. Not for the institution, not for the monarchy, for family. Just for family. His voice carried the kind of urgency that only comes from someone who understands that this is the last time the question will be asked. William's answer came without hesitation this time. Family cannot be the excuse we hide behind to dodge consequences. That line will outlast both of them. It will be quoted in biographies not yet written. It will be analyzed by people who study how institutions survive the people inside them. But on that call, in that moment, it was just one brother telling another that love was not enough, that love had never been the question, that the question had always been trust, and trust was gone, not damaged, not strained, not waiting to be rebuilt, gone. The way a fire is gone after the last ember stops glowing and the ash turns cold. But the call was not the reason for the final decision. Catherine was. This is the detail that has not been widely reported. Catherine told William something that ended the debate permanently. She told him that if Meghan fought her way back into family events, she would pull back from public life, not as a threat, not as an ultimatum delivered in anger, as a statement of fact. She would withdraw rather than risk her children being near that level of tension. She would choose their safety over her own visibility. She would disappear from public life to protect them, and she said it with the kind of quiet certainty that William had learned over years of marriage never to mistake for bluffing. William was not choosing between his brother and the institution. He was choosing between his wife's trust and his brother's wife's demands. That is a different choice entirely, and he made it without looking back. He made it the way he had learned to make every consequential decision since watching his mother's funeral from behind a wall of cameras, completely, irreversibly, without leaving a crack for doubt to crawl through later. The formal denial came through official channels, clean, final, precise. All future contact would go through official channels only. No private letters, no personal appeals, no back-channel conversations through mutual friends. The palace confirmed it was permanent policy, not a temporary measure. The language in internal files was updated. Every reference to temporary measures was replaced with permanent policy. Every document was amended. Every protocol was revised. The machinery of the institution moved with the efficiency of something that had been waiting a long time to be told what to do. Harry tried one more time. He called an old palace contact. Someone who had always taken his calls, someone who had always found a way to keep a line open, even when the official lines were closed. This time there was dead silence. Not a voicemail, not a polite deflection. Dead silence. The restrictions were already active. The contact could not speak to him. Would not speak to him. The wall was already built. And the speed of it told Harry something worse than the silence itself. This had been prepared. This had been waiting. Charles made one final attempt. He floated the idea of a supervised holiday appearance. Something small, something controlled. A Christmas photo, perhaps, or a brief greeting at a family gathering with enough staff present to manage every interaction. He imagined the kind of carefully staged moment that could exist in a press release without existing in reality. William shut it down instantly, not angrily, not dramatically, He simply said no. Even that small a compromise was still too great a risk. His tone left no room for discussion, and no one in the room asked him to explain. Charles did not push back. He went quiet. And that silence from a father who had spent decades negotiating the impossible gap between duty and love said more than any argument ever could. The door was not closed, it was removed. The reconciliation promise failed at every checkpoint. The charity reception outburst revealed priorities that had nothing to do with healing. The children's letters revealed a breach that had nothing to do with love. The information leak revealed a network that had nothing to do with family. Each failure made the standard harder to meet. Each revelation moved the goalpost further away. And no defense, however genuine, addressed the core concern. The children, that was always the line. Not protocol, not precedent, not institutional pride. The children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, never asked to be part of this story. They never asked to have their schedules monitored. They never asked to receive letters from an aunt they barely know referencing events they had not been told about. They never asked for any of it. And the adults who were supposed to protect them from exactly this kind of pressure did their job. That is not cruelty. That is not pettiness. That is parenting. And William, who had spent his entire childhood watching adults fail to protect the people they claimed to love, understood that distinction better than anyone alive. Meghan's promise was not kept. Not because the institution is heartless, not because William is vindictive, not because Catherine is territorial. The promise was not kept because the person who made it could not meet her own standard. She said reconciliation. Her actions said access. She said healing. Her actions said leverage. She said family. Her actions said something else entirely. And now comes the part no one expected. The case is already being used as precedent. Inside the palace, this is no longer about the Sussexes. It is about everyone who comes after. Anyone who marries into the House of Windsor and later walks away now inherits this same wall. The rules William established are not personal. They are structural. They will apply to the next departure and the one after that. They will apply to situations no one has imagined yet. The blueprint is drawn. The architecture is permanent. Word moving through palace legal circles confirms that within days of the formal denial, this case was already being referenced as the framework for handling every future royal exit. Not by name, not with the Sussexes mentioned, but the structure was unmistakable. The wall William built for his family is now the wall the institution will build for itself. Harry's road back is sealed, not because William does not love him, he does. That was never the question. The road is sealed because love without trust is just nostalgia. And nostalgia does not get you through security. It does not get your calls returned. It does not get your letters read. It gets you nothing but the memory of a door that used to be there. The door was not closed, it was removed. Meghan will continue to speak about family. She will continue to reference healing and growth and the importance of connection. She will say the right words in the right interviews at the right moments, and none of it will matter. Because the standard was set by her own words, and the outcome had to answer them. It answered them completely, quietly, permanently, without the drama that Meghan had grown accustomed to generating, and without the ambiguity that the palace had once relied on to avoid confrontation. The palace moves forward. Catherine continues her return to public life, measured and deliberate, surrounded by protections that did not exist 3 years ago. William carries the weight of a decision that cost him his brother's presence. He does not appear to regret it. He appears to understand it, and there is a difference between those two things that most people never learn. William did not choose this fight. He did not want it. He did not enjoy winning it. But when the evidence arrived, when the summary landed on his desk, and the letter was traced, and the breach was confirmed, he did what his position demanded. He protected the people who could not protect themselves. He drew a line, and he held it. And he held it knowing that holding it meant losing his brother. That is not the action of a man settling a score. That is the action of a man who has decided what matters most and refuses to pretend otherwise. Harry sits in Montecito with a phone that connects to fewer numbers than it used to. The California light still floods through the windows every morning, but the silence inside the house is different now. It is the silence of someone who has run out of calls to make. He is not a villain in this story. He is a man who trusted the wrong narrative. He believed reconciliation was possible because he needed it to be possible. He believed his wife's intentions because doubting them meant doubting the life he had chosen. That is not weakness. That is human. And somewhere in the quiet of that house, on a phone that rings less often now, he carries the knowledge that the brother he grew up with, the brother who held his hand behind their mother's coffin, has chosen a world that no longer includes him, not out of cruelty, out of necessity. And necessity is the coldest reason of all, because it leaves no one to blame and nothing to fight against. But human is not enough when children are involved. Human is not enough when trust has been broken beyond repair. No apology fixes it. No time heals it. No good intention delivered through intermediaries rebuilds it. Human is not enough when the institution you left behind has finally learned to protect itself. It no longer trusts the people who claim to love it while dismantling it from the outside. The door was not closed, it was removed, and where it once stood, there is only a wall, smooth and featureless and permanent, no handle, no hinge, no gap where light might slip through to suggest that something waits on the other side. Nothing waits on the other side. The promise was made, the promise was tested, the promise was not kept, and the family that remains inside those walls will go on without the people who chose to leave, not with anger, not with satisfaction, with the quiet, irreversible clarity of people who finally stopped hoping for something that was